A2 is forming simple sentences, which was too long to fit in that width. So today is all about subjects, verbs and objects, and how we're going to put sentences together from their constituent parts. And the constituent parts are SVIDE, but we'll get to that in a little moment. So by the end of this lesson, either live or on YouTube, you should be able to conjugate verbs in the present tense, whether those are the easiest verbs, whether they're separable, whether they're a little bit different in the way they conjugate, or they're completely irregular, and those are two verbs we'll talk about, and be able to start putting sentences together with the correct word order and the correct ideas behind that word order as well. And in here, just in red here, I've written verb strength next to regular verbs, and that's something that's kind of come up a lot. And what I mean by verb strength is there's kind of a sliding scale about how much verbs want to change as we conjugate them. So if a verb is very weak, it's going to follow the most simple rules, conjugate perfectly, and not going to change. Stronger verbs are going to change their vowels or their consonants to make themselves easier to say or nicer, but then obviously incurring more difficulty. And how strong a verb is basically depends how many situations it's going to change. So we're going to get right into it. So below here, perfect, I have a sliding scale of verbs, and there are 8 verbs here. And I'm going to first take you through what all of them mean, because it's some vocab, if anything. So make it is to sense or to perceive, and to, for example, to do with your senses like vision and hearing and stuff. And if you've watched A1 pronunciation, then you should kind of have an idea maybe about how to pronounce some of these words. So all of these top 6 end in ET, and that's going to be your kind of standard verb suffix, and therefore it's going to be us at the end, not et. So it's make it, and the other first one is kuntet, and kuntet is to do with fire, basically. So it's to burn or to set alight or to combust or whatever word you want to use for that. And these have a name. These are weak verbs, and they're weak because when we apply the rules of conjugation, not only are they regular, they apply normally, but they also, nothing else changes, nothing else goes on. They're just very, very happy to kind of go along. And the next 2 down are also weak. So I'm also going to use the word weak to describe them, because again, they're not going to change. But these have another incurred difficulty. So these are merket and lasset. Now, merket is to radiate or to give off, and that can be both physically, so for example, kind of radiation like in physics, but it can also be in terms of vibes, to put it colloquially, the kind of way in which someone maybe makes you feel. That's going to be the correct verb. Like colloquially, when people in English say it's giving, it's like giving tacky or whatever, that's the same idea, that figurative use. And lasset is going to be probably more useful. Lasset is to read. Now, you may have heard in English when people talk about university and stuff, they say, I read classics at Exeter. And we can also use lasset like that. So it can also mean to study in kind of a posh sense. So remember the subjects you're studying. Not necessarily, I'm studying respiration and biology. There is a proper verb for that, but it can also be used in that sense. Now, these are weak verbs. These follow the rules. But they have these double vowels here, these long vowels. And we're going to see what happens to these long vowels and the way these long vowels move around to make these words a little bit nicer. But that's still kind of within the domain of weak. Now we're going to move down. Now, these 2 here, I discussed these 2 particular verbs in A1, slujet and veljet. They're quite difficult words to pronounce in some respect, and they have a common letter, or they have some common letters between them. But the common letter that's important here is the letter J. Now, the letter J is an annoying letter because it's quite unstable. It doesn't like being at the end of words. And because of that, it tends to kind of, move around. And the other thing is, when we talk about palatalized vowels, and if you remember, that's A, I, and Oi. From a linguistics perspective, this is also based kind of around the y sound and the ideas behind that, which means that there's going to be a link between the consonant y and these three vowels, which we're going to kind of see play out. And basically what you're going to see happen is that the J is going to become a problem. And these are kind of, if you want, you can call these mixed verbs, I'm not probably going to call them mixed verbs, but the word mixed is used to describe verbs between kind of weak and strong. Now the weird thing is, the verbs that are usually called strong verbs are not on here. So I'm going to give you an example of a strong verb now. Oh, I just hit my keyboard, sorry about that. So an example of a strong verb is haltet, and this means to hold, like physically, like if I'm holding a pen. And haltet is a strong verb. That's the word we use to describe it. But in the present tense, which is kind of where we're working today, we're only thinking about the present tense today, this verb is entirely regular. And it's when we do the past tense in a couple of lessons' time, and when we do the imperatives in a kind of long time, a couple of months' time for the light lessons, we'll see how then those vowels in this instance change. So actually we're not thinking about strong verbs today. We're kind of going weak, slightly strong in the terms of the J's, and then we're jumping to these two verbs at the bottom. Now these two verbs are really difficult. These two verbs are the only two really irregular verbs. And I've also just realised that I didn't tell you what slujet and veljet meant. So we did discuss it last time, but slujet is to cover, to hide, to curtain, and veljet is to pick, to choose, to vote, those kinds of things. So just going back down, these two verbs are kind of your worst enemies. They are problem causing, to say the least. And the thing that is, just make that easy for those watching live, the thing that is problem causing about them, so to speak, is that they don't conjugate regularly. And the first hint this is going to be, if I scroll across to where I have some more space, most verbs are going to end et. Now, when we meet modal verbs, these can end in or, and in conditional form, they can end ir. And this is something I'm going to talk about another time. I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm not going to incur too much extra complexity. But I am just going to say that these are normal verb endings. So most of the time, et, modal verbs, or or ir, depending on the circumstance, mostly or. And that's what verbs are supposed to end in. Well, these two verbs, vesa and kura, obviously end in an e. There's an e on its own. And to kind of give some more information on this, verbs used to end in vowels, but now they don't. And these two verbs have stayed ending in a vowel. But these, I promise, I'm not simplifying this or making it up. These are the only two ones that don't end in et, or, or ir. That's not a vocab thing. That is it. And unfortunately, you may be hoping that these two verbs are useless and that you don't have to care about them and that you can just forget about them. But unfortunately, these are also the two most common verbs, and maybe that doesn't come as a surprise. So, vesa is to be, and all the kind of things come that to exist, those kinds of things, and I'm going to say all of them. And kura is essentially to do, to make, to complete, to finish, to put together, all those kinds of things. So these are also your two most important verbs. And they're quite versatile, but I'm going to start by just pointing out something I was thinking about before. I don't want to get people confused about. So in English, we can have a sentence like, he doesn't have a phone, but I do. In fact, I'm going to change the word phone. In fact, no, let's leave the word phone now, sorry. So he doesn't have a phone, but I do. Now, you're not doing anything, right? The link is between the doesn't, the does not, and the do. And this is creating the contrast here. But the problem with this is that you may know that English's use of do, and in fact specifically doesn't or don't, to make negatives is a bit unusual. And certainly with Wølfterek, when we talk about negatives, you'll find out that it certainly doesn't do this. Negatives are based on suffixes. And this is going to create a problem for us, right? What I'm going to say here is you can't say, to kind of end it, you can't use courre here. So you can't say, and we'll come on to conjugation in a bit, you can't say, oh, my personal pronoun table's in the way, sorry. Got rid of it. You can't end it with ye cour, which, for your information, is the kind of I conjugation of courre. So you can't end it with that, right? Because then that would be like he doesn't do something. He doesn't do something, but I do. Not he doesn't have something. So if a sentence, if what we're comparing, say, has have, and we'll probably learn today that have. So if I translate the sentence, this is just for your interest. This is this is how I would translate this sentence. Gaan geef nen von je geef. So if we kind of go through this quickly, basically this is the has. Here we're literally saying he has no phone rather than he doesn't have a phone, because we'll talk about that another time. But then notice when I say but I do, I'm like saying but I have rather than I do. So I just want to point out about courre, because I want to work on the meanings of these, and then we'll kind of come to conjugation. So the next thing I'm going to show you about conjugation is this table, and I have shown you this table before. Today we're certainly not going to need this bit, so I'm going to kind of rub out what we don't need. Certainly not going to need to know anything about the instrumental. And we don't need to know anything about the genitive, but we are going to talk about these possessive pronouns, particularly just going to use men. And, there are a lot of pronouns. I mean, like any language has a lot of pronouns. These are only the personal pronouns that aren't on here. There aren't relative pronouns and question words and stuff. But one thing that I do want to point out is that in languages that have a lot of declension, and the one that's kind of just maybe sprung to mind is German. So if I just give an example of German, the German word for my, I'm going to say, is mine. And we're going to conjugate, and it declines, so meine, meiner, meinem, etc. And you may think, and you may be hoping otherwise, that in Wølfterek, the word for my and your and his does the same thing, but it doesn't, right? So the possessive is considered a personal pronoun, and it doesn't decline. So the word for my is min. That is the word for my. It doesn't matter the case, doesn't matter the gender. The only thing that matters is obviously the person, so whether it's my or your. But that's just something I want to point out, and hope that maybe gives you a bit of relief. I'm trying to, maybe after last time, scaring some people, trying to start with a bit of relief, and everything is not as bad as it sounds. So I'm just going to come back up to the aim of the lesson. So I've just talked about the kind of verbs we're going to talk about. we're now just going to go kind of straight into how we conjugate them. And once I've talked about how we conjugate them, I'm then going to start talking about how we use them, because the aim kind of by the end of this, if you like, is that you can make a sentence. And so I also need to go quickly because I don't want to run out of time or be too long, and then you don't know how to. So I'm going to start by writing out the first verb we're going to look at. And sorry if I'm kind of writing over the face cam, not much I can do about that. But that is meket, to sense or to perceive. So this is the first one we're gonna use. And we are going to quickly move on to some other ones. So this is an infinitive. Now it's actually more than that, but for now we're just going to think about it as an infinitive. So this means to sense, to perceive. But you don't say I to sense, I to perceive, so we're going to conjugate it into the relevant forms. Now, I'm going to write out the pronouns. Hopefully I'll kind of show you what the pronouns are, talked about the pronouns. Hopefully these will kind of settle in quite quickly, maybe. You'll get used to them. So the pronouns are ye, toy, then han, and hun. Those are the singular pronouns. And then jeken, toyen, and then hanen and hornen. Sorry, a bit of lag there. Hanen and hornen. And so this is kind of, ye is kind of I, toy is you, han and hun are not he and she. Han is he and she, and hun is it. So it's kind of like more of a boundary between the animate and the inanimate. And that's because, as I discussed, masculine and feminine share a lot together. And then in other cases that we're definitely not talking about today, masculine and neuter share stuff together. So you're kind of always in these nice pairs. Jeken, toyen, hanen, hornen, just their plurals. And that's why they have the sound at the end. They are, as I said last time, they are literally just plurals. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our infinitive and we're going to get what we call a stem. And you've probably done this in quite a few languages if you've learnt them, like French and German, two I can think of off the top of my head. And all we're going to do is the et is the suffix that makes it a verb. So we're just going to take it off, and now we get make. And funny enough, make is a noun. It means perception. But that's not relevant right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out make on all of these. And then I'm going to show you what, if anything, we're going to add to make our conjugation. Hence, make. It's all about making. And actually, I can point out now that MUGK is a homophone with English make. Like, I make biscuits. So if that helps you to think about it that way, then that's fine. And that's good. So first of all, the I in the he form, we're done. That is all we do. We just take off the et. The positive of that is, it's nice and easy to remember. There's no adding anything back. The negative is, any time that we have irregular verbs, strong verbs and stuff, the first place that's going to kind of feel it is the I and he form, which are the ones you're going to use a lot. Everything has pros and cons. I'm now going to add es, en, and en. And the plural form's all the same. And that's true of every regular verb. The plural form's all the same. The I form is the same as the he form. Even strong verbs, even the verbs with J's in them that we can talk about a little bit. That is just the way it is. They're kind of always the same as each other. There are a couple of exceptions in our regular verbs, but that's not to talk about right now. Now, the other thing I want to point out is, first of all, you should kind of take this in. If you want to take kind of light notes, if you don't want to write loads of things down, just write a little bit down, then that I would recommend you write this down and nothing else. Because this is kind of bread and butter, isn't it? This is the stuff you're going to be relying on, because you're going to need to conjugate verbs. So even if you kind of want a bit of a light approach to notes, which is fine, I still recommend you do this. I mean, kind of, these are all our forms. I'm going to take these off. And something else I want to point out is that the es and ens, these are suffixes. These are what we're adding to conjugate it. So it's not going to be merkes, it's going to be merkus. It's not going to be merken, it's going to be merken. Right? And that's really important to get the pronunciation correct. Merken is not a word. Neither is maken, or however else you kind of pronounce it wrong. It's merken. And merkus and mek. And this stem, once we've used it to conjugate things in that sense, I'm just going to tell you now that the stem is a term we use to help us with conjugating. The stem isn't used for anything. We're never going to use this on its own as a stem. So this is here to help you conjugate. If you want, you can actually not think about that. So you really want to think about it as the I and the he forms have the et taken off, then the u form, the u singular form, has the t swap for an s, and all the plural forms have the t swap for an n. That's what's going on. There are different ways you can obviously think about the same thing. And I'm going to show you another verb now, as I promised. I'm going to show you kuntet, which is to burn or to set alight. And this time I'm not going to write a stem, because I kind of want to get away from that language, if that makes sense, because it's not really, the stem isn't a linguistics thing that we're going to use in the language, right? So I'd rather probably not refer to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, using the power of technology, I can just copy and paste kunt to all of these. And because this is all regular, it's all going to be the same rules. Where I had make before, I now just have kunt. And so if you wanted to say, I burn, I set on fire, I combust, je kunt. So there we go. You already know at least 3 or 4 verbs. I know that these verbs might not feel the most useful in terms of like the grammar of the words you want to use. But first of all, I don't know I don't know what verbs you want to use, and second of all, I'm kind of prioritizing verbs on good examples for the grammar, and what the verbs you choose to learn, obviously up to you. So this is the conjugation. I've literally just done copying and pasting in Notepad. This is the conjugation of kuntet, which is to burn, to set alight, to set on fire, to combust, whatever you want to call it. I noticed that the kind of face cam in the corner is obviously cutting off the form for Hanen and Hornen. And at first I moved that away, but actually I don't need to move that away, do I? Because you know that the form for Hanen and Hornen is always going to be the same as for Jeken and for Toren. So I'm happy to leave that covered up. This is the inconvenience obviously having the face cam. If that's going to be the way it is. And in fact, I'm probably going to move the face cam from now to the top. So as I conjugate these verbs, it's not in the way. There we go. So, in terms of, we're going to move on now to our kind of like level 2 difficulty that I came up with. And the first example of this is going to be merket. And merket is to radiate, to emit, to give off, as I said before. And you may be wondering, is there a relation between merket, to give something off, and makert, with the G in it, to perceive something, which kind of opposites or go together? And the answer to that, if you're curious, is yes. And it's something we can talk about another time. Often these kinds of verbs come in nice little pairs. But that is something I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about today. The one thing I do want to say is these verbs are somewhat opposites or complements to one another, and it's really important that you pronounce this really correctly. Because if you say merket for merket or vice versa, you flip the meaning. So it's merket and makert. And the more confident you are, the more accurate you will be. So you're better being confident. And this word definitely is not pronounced meek. I don't want to hear meek just because it's how that word would be pronounced in English. And I'm going to do the same thing as before, I'm going to take what I was calling the stem, and I'm going to copy and paste it kind of around. Now I have some bad news, which is that we're not done. This is not correct. This is not final. And you may be thinking, well, that's ridiculous because you said that this verb was regular, and it is regular. But I'm going to point out the I form and the he form, which currently is make. Now, the reason that the vowel is long, it's 2 letters. The reason it's meket, not just a kind of shorter kind of asterisk next to it, not that, is that Wølfterek likes to have these even syllables, likes to have these kind of nice syllables, and those generally come in lengths of 3 letters. And because it's always kind of 1 syllable, it's what we're 1 letter for 1 unit length, you can see the fact that, for example, this one is 5 is going to mean that what we'd rather just extend the vowel and make it 6, so 2 sets of 3, and to make it meket, than to have 1 set of 5 or a 3 and a 2. And that's just the way language works. And it means that you end up with these nice even syllables, and you do that by changing the length of vowels. So remember when I talked about how short vowels and long vowels? So for example, a single E just becomes double E, or the U becomes OR, and the O also becomes OR. So that's the way in which vowels kind of lengthen and contract. And that they're always doing that. And they're doing that so that we can end up with these even syllable lengths. So when we look at the word make, which is M-E-E-K, there's no reason to have a double E, because now that's 4. We're just making our lives more difficult. So this doesn't have the double E. So I'm going to correct this now to ye mek, toy mekus, han mek. Yeken, toyen, hanen, and honen are all meken. So long E, if you like, for the ones with suffixes to kind of even out to 6, and shorter E for the single letter E for the I and the he form, and that's the ones without suffixes, and that's going to make it a nice length of 3. And you can do the same thing. The other example I gave was laset, and we can do the same thing for laset. So I'm just going to write it next to it. I don't see why I have to rub everything out. So laset, that's to read. Ye las. Toi lases. Han las. And then the yeken, toyen, hanen, hornen, it's all going to be lasen. And another thing I'm just going to point out really quickly is that notice when I said this word, the correct pronunciation of this word is lases, not lasses. So in English, when we have S at the end of words, they tend to become Z a lot. Like, for example, the plural of thing is things, not things. But that's not the case in Wølfterek. So just be careful that your final S is staying as the S sound and not becoming the Z sound, just because that's what we do in English. And you should never hear the Z in Wølfterek. That sound just isn't there. Now, I'm going to very quickly talk about those cheeky kind of verbs with J in them. I'm not going to teach you in detail how to conjugate them, because it's not really worth your time. They're quite rare. I just want to make you aware that they exist. And so if you see one, you're not kind of baffled. I want to expose you to them without teaching them. So the best example of the first type is varied. Now, this, I'm going to say the fancy name for it, we call a J dropping verb. And you're going to see why pretty quickly. So I'm going to start by doing what we've been doing so far. And I'm just going to write out then like what it should be, if you know what I mean. Got a little bit of lag, so just be careful. So I've applied the rules, and these look pretty good, don't they? But they don't look they don't look perfect, do they? And you can probably see pretty quickly what the main problem is going to be, and that's the I in the he form. And if anyone would like to volunteer saying veli, please have a go. But veli is very hard to say. That J isn't happy. And basically, to summarise for now, we just get rid of the J. So if you see ye vel, you might think this comes from... So if you see ye vel as a kind of like in writing, you might think this comes from velet, right? Making that nice even length of 6. But it doesn't. So there's a little bit of... So the incurred difficulty of these verbs is you've got to have prior knowledge to know whether this comes from velet or veliet. And in fact, this could also, be the, other irregular verbs or other strong verbs can then become this. So there's a bit of an art, and the reason you've got to then know the grammar and the vocab can be confident with it is that then you can use it. So when you see yevel, you know, aha, well that comes from veliet. The J is just not there because who wants to say veli? That'd be really difficult to say. And the other one is the other type. I'm just going to rub out make it and make it for now. The other type that is going to be annoying to you is like slujet. And again, the ET is obviously the suffix. And I'm going to keep with the rules, right? So, and we're going to find a very similar problem. So the very similar problem that we're going to find is that who wants to pronounce sluj? So the I form and the he form, I'm going to be confident enough to say this is unpronounceable. No one wants to say sluj. And for reasons that we're not going to go into today, because this can't be that comprehensive, I don't want to overload, and also I don't want to waste time and run out of time. But what we're going to do here, just for your interest, just so you know, is this becomes sloy, as does, they're always going to, at least they're always going to be the same as one another, and this one becomes sloy. Now remember when I said before that the problem with these verbs is that the problem with the idea of the I form and the he form being the most simple to construct is that then they're also the most likely to kind of be irregular or have problems. Well, this is an example of this. These two verbs I've just shown you, the you form and the plural forms, right? They're all the same. They're happy. It's the I form and the he form that are incurring all these problems. And it's the I form that you're going to spend most of the time saying and hearing, as is the he form is going to be really common as well. Maybe say compared to the plural you're probably not going to hear very much, are you? But the I and he are going to come up a lot. So when you hear sloy, first of all, don't panic. I'll say another time how you know this comes from slujet or sloyet. You don't know which one of those two. But just be aware. Basically, if you see any conjugated I and he form ending with a G, it's one of these really annoying verbs. Or it's very likely to be one of these really annoying verbs. And so I'm just making you aware of their existence. We're not going to talk about them much more today. The main reason we're not going to talk about them much more today is that we don't have time, and there are two very pressing verbs we're going to get onto. The first one is vesa. Now, vesa means to be. This is not vesa. This is not vese. This is vesa. And make sure you get that right. It's not optional. So, I'm going to write them out. Now, basically, remember all those rules I talked about? Well, because this verb ends in an E, not ET, all those rules basically just go straight out the window, to be honest. And it's irregular. It's very irregular. And this is the present tense. Wait until you see the other tenses. Okay, so I've written that out now, and the most important thing to know. So first, we just have to learn this. But remember when I said that the I form and the he form are always the same, and all the plural forms are always the same? Well, basically, to give you some linguistics, I'm going to draw a line here. The singular and the plural I form, so I and we, came from, there's a bit of, if I draw it a bit like this, two verbs kind of split and then came back together. And because of that, we have E's and A's kind of flying everywhere. We'll see, plenty of other letters are going to get a piece of the cake. So, je vais, most useful one, toi vases, han vas, then je conversen, versen, not versen. So if it was a long E, it would be V-E-E-S-E-N. So just be careful that the R isn't part of the vowel, it's a separate consonant, versen. And then toyen, varsen, hanen, and hornen, varsen. And obviously these are all suffixes, they're all endings, so they're going to be that sound rather than the n. So it's going to be varsen. And these, I suggest you probably screenshot this now, or come back to another time and kind of screenshot it or take note of it, because this is something you're just going to have to learn. And the verb to be is pretty instrumental to the language, isn't it? And it's used a lot, is what I'd say. And I'm just going to rub this out now, so I can write the other very irregular verb I'm going to use. It's used quite a lot, not as much as English to be and to do, because it's not really used as an auxiliary verb, these two verbs. But we will see how they're used, and we'll see that they're used a lot, because, for example, there's no separate verb to exist, so there's just to be. And when we talk about cases in more detail, we'll also see how to be and to do taking different cases can mean different things. So I'm going to conjugate this now. So, no words really. I mean, the benefit compared to Vesa is that the forms that normally match up, so I and he and the plurals, do match up. The downside, what the hell is going on? So, je cours, so it's not it's not consonant and then just vowels. The r at the end is another consonant, so it's je cours, toi cours, han and hun cours, so the same as the I form. Then jeken, toyen, hanen, hornen, it's all corn. And this is a homophone with the English word corn, like corn on the cob. It's obviously different spelling, but it's the same pronunciation. And now I'm going to talk you these verbs. So I'm going to just go quickly back. In fact, I'm going to you can go back and screenshot that, obviously, if you want. I recommend it. I'm going to go back to this, which I showed you. And so you can see I've given you a taste of, just ignore the stuff on the bottom right, just the stuff on the left. I've given you a taste of the weakest, the ones that have no changes except just the conjugation, the ones that need their verbs shifting around slightly to make the syllables work, the ways that J's can be a bit annoying, and then our two really irregular verbs. And basically, the truth is, just need to put in the work to learn it. And once you learn it, it'll be easy. And in terms of what we were hoping to achieve, we've definitely ticked off these now. I'm just going to rub that out. Now we're going to talk about word order. I'm going to start putting sentences together. So I'm going to say SVIDE. And you've seen SVIDE because it was on that slide. But SVIDE is something that I've basically made up to help you. It's not used in any other languages, hopefully, probably. So S stands for subject. The first thing in every sentence, if possible, in every clause, is going to be the subject. And a subject is going to be represented probably with either just a noun on its own, or one of the pronouns I was using, je, toi, han, hun, jeken, toyen, han, and hornen. Right? So those ones. Next, is going to be the verb group. Now, this isn't necessarily just a single verb. This could be multiple verbs. This is when we learn about adverbs, when we put the adverbs. And equally, the subject doesn't necessarily just have to be I or he. It could be my friends and I. Right? So there might be more information in there, but it's the broad grouping. So this is going to be the verbs and everything that goes with the verbs. And we'll learn at various points what goes where. Then we have the... Oh, that's not working, is it? Then we have the indirect object. And I'm going to write +2 here, and we're going to learn what this means in a minute. Then, direct object. I'm not going to write anything next to that. And then, everything else. Everything else, so whether that's a time phrase, like saying like this morning, this afternoon, a place phrase, at my house, whether that's saying how you did it, like with a pen or with my phone, or whether you're adding more information, so with my friends, anything else is going to go at the end. And I'm in brackets, and we're probably not going to talk about this one much today because there's a sense of, I don't want to get too complicated, but we're going to put plus with. Now, basically, the reason I'm going to have to talk about +2 is there's no way to avoid it. We can just avoid plus with, even if it's less kind of realistic of how you're actually supposed to speak. It's not affecting how grammatical it is, and that's the priority of the grammar. And I just want to talk about what a direct and indirect object is. So I'm going to write out a sentence just at the top here. I'm going to write out, I gave the present to him. And this is a really good example. So the present is what's being given. So the present is the directly being affected by the verb. You're not giving him, you're not giving yourself. The present is what's being given, and therefore the present is direct. To him, and that's where the 2 is coming in. Well, this is the indirect. It's an object, and he is being affected because he's getting a present in that sense, but he's not being affected in that he's not being affected by the verb direct, as in he's not being given, right? So this is indirect, and if you don't really understand between direct and indirect, that's the same across many languages. You can just go watch a YouTube video on it. This is not a unique thing for this language, in English, you could either say, I gave the present to him, as I just said, or you could say, I gave him the present, and that's relic of when we had our own cases and our own different systems. In Wølfterek, you have to say, I gave him the present. If you say, I gave the present him, then it just doesn't work, because then you're giving him to the present. And there is no word for 2. So this word in Wølfterek doesn't exist. Obviously, 2 as in the number 2 does exist, like there is a number between 1 and 3, but 2 in the sense of TO does not exist. Everywhere we see 2 in English, it's been replaced by something else. And that's why we have to talk about using the indirect object like that, because there's no way you physically cannot say, I gave the present to him. There aren't the words and the means to express that. You say, I gave him the present. And someone has just asked live, are you doing the thing where a verb can take different cases, which obviously affects differential meaning? The answer to that is there's a double answer to that. Yes, and we're not going to talk about that in too much detail because it's going to introduce confusion. For now, and that brings me on nicely, I'm going to write some other letters. I like writing out letters and acronyms and stuff. So, N stands for nominative, the nominative case. D stands for the dative case. A stands for the accusative case. D is just, again, if you have more dative stuff going on. And I is the instrumental. I'm going to I'm actually going to, having just written that, in case people are wondering, I'm going to rub it off because I don't want to talk about it. Now, there are two ways in which we use the dative. One of them is to reference an indirect object. So, for example, you're giving it to him. And the other one is for any other preposition. You might say, I gave it to him at his house. You might say, I gave it to him with a friend. So those are other things that might use the dative. But the first use of the dative, this is exclusively for the idea of the indirect object. And it's really important that we get this correct. And I'm going to start getting you to construct some sentences. My lines disappeared for a second. So the first sentence I'm going to get you to say, so first of all, I'm going to give you a verb. All great things start with a verb. The verb I'm going to give you is a really versatile, really good verb. And this is, and a really easy verb. This is sekut. Sekut is to say, is to speak, is to discuss, all those kinds of things. And it can also be used in a separable way, but we'll come to that in a minute. And the first sentence you're going to need is I speak Wølfterek. So to say I speak Wølfterek, this is going to be your subject, your verb, and the verb ideas. Now, Wølfterek is what you are speaking. So just as the present is what you are giving, Wølfterek, what you are speaking. So this is going to be the direct object. And this is going to, for now, there's not that much going on, but this is going to be important. So what's I? Well, I is yay. We're going to conjugate that regularly, so yay sake. And then just Wølfterek. Nice and easy, right? And let's just make sure that's a nice big capital W, actually. 3 words, it's kind of 1 for 1. Now, I'm going to say, I speak Wølfterek to my child. Now, the question is this. The idea of to my child, you have 3 options. Does this come before Wølfterek? Does this come after Wølfterek? Or can it be either of them? And as much as that's an open question and people can tell me the answer I'm just going to tell you now is that it goes before. To my child, this bit here is your indirect object. If you don't understand the direct versus indirect objects, I suggest you watch another YouTube video or something like that on that. And I'm going to tell you that and I talked about this at the start on purpose so I could use this example, is mem, and this never changes. And remember I said last time, or maybe 2 times ago, that child is barn. So same as lots of Nordic languages, barn is child. So to say to my child, we're going to take this. This is kind of in the nominative and accusative case. Both those cases would be the same. We're going to take this in the dative case. Now, the way we do this is we start the final consonant of the word, if it ends, presuming it ends with a consonant, we're going to shift that along one, and we're going to sandwich a G before and an E after. That's not a universal rule. That's what we're doing here. That's what we're going to do most of the time. So, mem barn, my child. Membina, that's how that be pronounced, to my child. That means to my child. So, I'm now going to introduce this into the sentence, and I'm going to do this lazily with kind of moving things around, not writing them again. And I can just slot this in here. And this means I speak Wølfterek to my child. If I put this the other way around, if I said Jesek Wølfterek membina, that would that could theoretically, I suppose bina is in the dative, but if I'm going to kind of be crude about it, I'd say, oh well, maybe that means I speak child or I speak my child with Wølfterek, even whether or not that's true. So it's important that we get the really correct word order. Now I'm going to be really evil, and I'm going to change to my child very subtle difference to with my child. Now remember, up here or up somewhere, the indirect object is when we're talking about to. If I'm talking about with, and I'm telling you, ignore this, we're not talking about that right now. So I'm going to rub that out. When we're talking about with, that's not to, that's a different preposition, isn't it? So it's not our indirect object. It's not obviously our not direct object. Our direct object is Wølfterek. So it's going to be forced into the everything else. So where is it going to go? Is it going to go before or after? It's going to go after. Now, there's no word for to, but there is a word for with, and we're going to use the word for with. The word for with is mut. That's m/ot, very useful word. And it's going to take the dative, it's going to incur the dative, introduce the dative, whatever you want to say. But membina, my child, because it's no longer the indirect, or considered the indirect object in Wølfterek, it's going to go after. So to say I speak Wølfterek with my child, you say Wølfterek mut, or mut, sorry, membina. And that's pretty key, pretty important. I'm going to now show you a little bit about plurals, and to do that I'm going to change with my child to with my friends. And just to kind of annoy you, I'm going to change it to my friends. So we're just flipping back and forth. Now, what's my name? Never. I promise this never changes. This never changes. Now, friend is Vran. But that is in the nominative and accusative singular. That is the base form, the easy form. We don't work in easy forms here. If I'm saying with, I'm going to be in the dative. That is the entire rule. And we'll talk more about prepositions later, but that is the rule. With is always the dative. Now, the dative plural is a type of strong plural. So I'm going to show you. So the plural of Vran is is Vranen. That's just a general plural for friends, but we're in the dative, and the dative is what we call a strong case. And when I say strong case, what I mean by that is that it changes the ending of the plural from vranen to vranum. Vranum. So the end to an M. So now we have, let me scoot this across a bit. Vranen. And that's the indirect object. It's to my friends. So that's going to go before. Oh gosh. A little bit of an error there. That's going to go before Wølfterek. So I speak Wølfterek to my friends. Je zeg mem vranen Wølfterek. Now, I'm going to change the sentence up a bit. Maybe that's the new thing, and we're going to see what happens. Now, I'm going to change this to my friends and I speak it together. Nice and difficult, right? But not as difficult as we're going to get. This is the second most difficult one. So, we just used mem vreinem to mean my friends in the dative. But if this is before the verb, what's this going to be? This is going to be in the nominative, right? I wrote that somewhere. I wrote that up here. It's going to be in the nominative. Just make sure that this isn't even cut off by the camera. So to say that it's going to be a weak plural, and it's not going to have an N, it's just going to have an N at the end, which is what most of our plurals do. And it's going to be vranen. So mem vranen, my friends. The word for and is oi, like saying some oi. And I, yay, we learned that. Now this whole thing here is the subject. Now, my friends and I speak it together, we speak it together. It's plural, it's not singular, don't make that mistake. Many people make that mistake in many languages. Now remember that the we plural, all the plural conjugations of zeker are going to be zeker. So mem vranen or jij, zeker, it. Let's refer to our personal pronoun table, which kind of got chucked to the bottom, so I might have lost it slightly. See how I've rubbed out of that? Well, it. We could be referring to either, we could say we're speaking, technically, not from a vocabulary perspective, but just from a grammar perspective, we could say we're speaking a car together, and a car is, of course, a car is masculine. Or we could say that we're speaking Wølfterek together, for example, which is neuter. So we don't know which gender it is. If we don't know, we go neuter. It's the same in English. Actually, well, that's not really fully correct. It's the same in German, I'll just say. Now, if we're speaking it together, what case is it going to be? The case it's going to be in is the accusative. Because if we're speaking it is being spoken by us. And if it is being spoken by us, it is the direct object. And if it's the direct object, then it's going to be in the accusative. Those are the rules. And that's going to be the main place we use the accusative. There is another place we use the accusative, but we're not talking about that today. So we seem to have homed in. We've homed in our column, that's here. We've homed in on our row, that's here. The word we're looking for is hoi. So, hoi. There isn't, is there a word for together? Yes. To say my friends and I speak it together, we don't really use a word for together, just for to explain what's idiomatic, so what we're actually going to say. So we just say, so this would be the complete sentence. I'm going to rub out these brackets. And then vranen or jij, zeker hoi. My friends and I speak it, or say it, or discuss it together. Right? And that's it. You're done. That is the correct sentence. And if you kind of followed along or, tried to work a bit ahead of me, then that's amazing. If not, that doesn't matter. That's not what's important. Now, I'm going to make it difficult. This is going to be the most difficult example of this we do before we move on to the final bit. I'm aware this has been going on for a long time. So, how can we edit the sentence to add to our children? Now, first of all, where is to our children going to go in this sentence? Is it going to go start? Is it going to go to the left of hoi? Is it going to go to the right of hoi? Does it matter? The answer is it's going to go to the left of hoi. So if it's to our children, it's the indirect object. It's using to. It's all about to. Just rub that because that's annoying me. So I'm going to make some space by moving over hoi. Now, to our children. Let's start with R. Let's go back down to that pronoun table, which is somewhere down here. There we go. So we're looking at possessive. So if it's R, that's possessive. Now R is the possessive form of we, which is the first person plural. So our column is going to be here. It's going to be here. chosen one is Miriam. Now, I added a little bit of like freeze frame or title card, whatever you want to call it, to the previous one, explaining these kind of long ones. So E-E-G-E, longest vowel you're going to get, Miriam. So the air bit of the A is made longer, not the E bit of the A. So just make sure you're pronouncing that word correctly. If you hear anyone say me jam, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So remember, just as men never changes, does it? Mem is never going to change either. So R is still going to be mem. Now, remember that child is barn. The plural is barnen, but this is in the dative case. The dative case, we're going to need our strong plural. Our strong plural has the letter M at the end instead of N. You'll get used to that when we keep doing it. So, there we go. Kind of cut off the start. My friends and I speak it to our children. Mem vranen oye, seken meam ban hoy. And the hoy is the it. So the word order is slightly different. You just have to be careful with that, because the it has gone all the way to the end because it's a direct object. Now, that is as difficult as word order is going to get for now. There's other things we can throw in there, time phrases, place phrases. But if you get the fundamentals up here, let me rub out the things you don't need. If you get the fundamentals of SVIDE, you get the fundamentals of SVIDE, and you're all good in that sense, and I wouldn't worry much more. The last thing we're just going to touch on, and I promise this is the last thing, is separable verbs, and I promise these are quick. And I'm going to just do one quick example, and you're going to get it, and it's going to be fun. Now, you cannot get enough of slup, can you? It's like everywhere. I'm always using it. This is to cover, to hide, to conceal, blah, blah, blah. You know, all those kinds of things. To veil. So, if I want to say to uncover or to discover, in English, uncover is obviously plus cover, that's pretty obvious, and discover is dis plus cover. They're literally the opposites, and we attach it to the start. But in Wølfterek, we tend not to attach things to the start. It makes a mess, it makes a mess with stress, all sorts of things. We attach it to the end in a separate word. So to uncover and discover the same, it's two words. So, this is pronounced sluyek. Take a little gap because it's a new word. Near. You're going to get used to the word near. It's everywhere. Sluyek, near. Now make sure it's really clearly two words. So let's think about stress. So this syllable is going to be stressed, and this syllable is going to be stressed. So it's sluyek, near. If you say sluyek, near, it's wrong, because sluyek, near would be or Slietnia would be an acceptable pronunciation, would be one long word. So if I write that out, so if you just stress this syllable, that's now a separate word. So really careful with the stress, really careful making it two words. Now, except from adding a suffix, a different suffix obviously, to sluet, nothing comes between these two. So there's distance here, that they're separate words, but they're together in that nothing is going to get between them. If we add an adverb, it's going to go after. All the objects of the sentence are going to go after. So to say I uncovered it, I is je. Remember that I told you before it's sløj. Near, because if I just said je sløj, that's I cover. Je sløj near, I uncover. That gap here, it's a separate word, but nothing in between. And remember it before we said was høj in the accusative. So I'm going to add that word here. Høj doesn't come before. If you're a German speaker, you might think that høj should come before. It doesn't. Nothing comes between. The only time something comes between is if I'm messing with this word. So for example, if I wanted to make this in the past tense, which we're not going to talk about today, I just want to show you how I might mess with this word. I can change this word, but still maintain this distance. If I wanted to say, I don't discover, I should probably never say I don't discover, but whatever. I can just tell you now that this I don't discover it is je sløjne near høj. So this can get in between. You can change the word, change the verb, but no extra word is going to come in here. And that is all you need to know about separable verbs. It's just like kind of little buddy to our Brawl Stars players who need Brawl Stars analogies. It's like the little buffies that they've just added. So it is just like that. It just sits on the side, still there. Don't forget about it or the verb will change meaning. And I'm just going to get another example, not because you need another example, but like I need to explain more, but I just think it'd be helpful. Remember how we talked about merket as descends? Well, I can tell you now that merket ant is to feel. And ant means lots of things, but main meaning is above. So it literally means to sense above. Don't ask why to sense above is to feel, it's just the way it is. Sometimes they're more logical than others, so obviously sluit near is really logical. Opposite of cover, uncover. Merket ant, to sense above, to feel, maybe less. And there's another one, which again I'm just going to reference to make sure I have it correctly. There we go. So merket af, to judge out of, sorry, to sense out of, I've just given it away, is to judge. So if you're like a judge, judge, some vocab is et merkia. Oops, I forgot to see. Don't forget the separable bits. Et af merkia is a judge. So that comes from merket af. But if you're talking about judging or ruling or deciding like that, and you forgot to say the af, suddenly it means perceiving. That's not the same thing. So just be careful. But in terms of the content, that is it. So present tense verb conjugation, we did that. So take off the et, add es for the you singular form, add em for the plural forms, for your normal verb. Separable verbs I've just explained now. So let it hang to the side. Don't forget about it, and don't let anything except suffixes get in between. Alternative verbs. So for example, looking at how J is affected, looking at how the vowels move around. We'll talk about that a lot more. Just being careful with those other conjugations and knowing which verbs they come from, and our two irregular verbs, which you just need to learn, and using that SVIDE word order, using that correct word order. So if you're with me live in Discord, I'll now take any questions that you may have, and if on YouTube, post them in the comments, and I'll see you soon.